In case you can't tell from looking at my channel, I love Pokemon, and I have for quite a long time. My first experience with the franchise was watching the original series on TV as a kid, but my love would become a full-on obsession when my parents got me a Game Boy Advance SP for my 5th birthday with both Pokemon Ruby and Sapphire. Since then, I've played every single Pokemon game as soon as they release, and I've loved almost every entry so far. But the 4th generation will always hold a special place in my heart. I remember as a kid watching Cartoon Network and seeing a preview for a new special introducing the Diamond and Pearl series. I'd never heard of Diamond and Pearl, so I immediately rushed to the Pokemon website to find out more. And while I was sad to find out that the game wouldn't release in the States for another few months, this was the first time I got to look over pre-release materials of any video game. And when I finally got my hands on Pokemon Diamond, I fell in love with the Sinnoh region. But my true love came with the definitive version, Pokemon Platinum. Platinum not only improved the flaws of Diamond and Pearl, but it expanded on what made the game so great. 60 new entries for the Sinnoh Dex, improved level curve, faster animations, and so much more. I spent so many hours playing the Gen 4 games, and I even had a fair bit of special event Pokemon that were prevalent at the time. But I was a dumb kid. And over time, I would end up resetting each of my Gen 4 games just because I wanted to play them again. So sadly, all of my favorite Pokemon on my childhood saves were eventually lost to time. But recently, I realized this is a blessing in disguise, because not only does this mean I can play my childhood copy of Platinum from scratch, but that means I can do everything in Pokemon Platinum from a completely new save file. This is the beginning of my journey to fully complete Pokemon Platinum. I hope you enjoy. Now, to be transparent, I will not be completing all of Pokemon Platinum in this one video. Completing older Pokemon games is a monumental task, so I'm going to be splitting this journey into 3 videos. The video you're watching now is my journey to complete the National Living Dex in one copy of the game. The second video will be a special side quest I don't want to spoil, and the third video will be completing everything else besides the Dex. Just because I'm only completing the Dex in this video doesn't mean this video will be short. It took me nearly a month to finish the Dex, which I feel justifies giving it its own video. Now, you might have noticed that I said I wanted to complete the National Living Dex. For those who don't know what that means, it means that instead of catching a Pichu and evolving it into Raichu to register the whole evolution line, I need to catch a Pichu, 2 Pikachu, and use a Thunderstone to evolve one of them into Raichu to own every individual member of the evolution line. Which means by the end of this challenge, I will own all 493 Pokemon from the first 4 generations of the franchise. Unlike the more modern Pokemon games, this can't be completed with just 1 or even 2 games. You need upwards of 10 different games, 3 consoles, and a whole lot of patience to get this done. I don't want to spoil everything needed for this challenge yet, so I'll go over what you need to get started. Obviously, you need a Nintendo DS with a copy of Pokemon Platinum. And yes, this whole challenge was done on actual hardware, so this new 3DS XL of mine has a capture board installed for recording purposes. Then, you'll also need both Pokemon Diamond and Pearl. While a majority of the Platinum Sinnoh Dex can be caught on one save file, Diamond and Pearl have 2 exclusive evolution lines apiece that can't be obtained in their definitive version. Plus, I need to get the other 2 Sinnoh starters anyway, so this makes it more convenient. And since the Diamond and Pearl Pokemon need to be traded over to Platinum, you'll need a second DS system. I also highly recommend that at least one of your DSs has a GBA slot for a couple of features I'll talk about later. For me, I'm using an original DS Fat that also has a capture card installed. Then you'll need both Pokemon Heart Gold and Soul Silver. This is where you'll get a majority of the Gen 1 and 2 Pokemon, as well as the rest of the Gen 3 Pokemon not available in Sinnoh. Thankfully, I already owned all of these games and systems, but if you wanted to do this from scratch, everything I've listed out would cost roughly $470. This total even includes the cheapest DS models with GBA slots and authentic DS games excluding the original box, so no matter what, this would cost a pretty penny. This also doesn't include everything needed for the challenge, but I'll update the total when those become relevant. While we could technically get started, if we want to do this as efficiently as possible, we need to plan out where to catch every Pokemon. So before I started, I created a spreadsheet of every Pokemon available in the 4th generation. Each one notes which game to catch them in and which area, and has a checklist counter that updates every time I check out a Pokemon. If you want to try this challenge, I've linked my spreadsheet in the description, which you can use to download a copy for yourself. Lucky for you, because you're getting the most curated version of my spreadsheet. When I originally made it, I had some Pokemon in really inconvenient spots, so I updated it as I went. Like, I was originally going to play all the way to the postgame in Pearl just for Trapinch. Could you imagine going to that amount of effort for a Trapinch? Before we get started, it would mean a whole lot if you can like the video and subscribe to the channel. This video took a long time to make, and the better it performs means I'll be more likely to make more big videos like this in the future. Also, I've recently opened up memberships for the channel. For just $2 a month, you can get early access to new videos, exclusive behind the scenes content, and a shout out at the end of every video. Thank you for watching, and let's begin. For this challenge, I wanted to play the main game first before playing any other, So on July 21st, I started playing Pokemon Platinum. Even though the 21st was a Sunday, I set my DS clock to a Thursday at 9 PM for something I'll explain later. My first goal of this challenge was to beat the game as quickly as possible, but along the way, I wanted to catch a decent amount of Pokemon as well. For my starter, I chose Chimchar because he's the best of the three, and I immediately lost to my rival on Route 201. Not a great start. On the way to Jubilife, I caught Bidoof, Starly, and Shinx. Also, Chimchar fainted during the first youngster battle, so he was already falling behind in levels. Not to worry though, he'd soon catch up because I wanted to fight as many trainers as possible on the way to the Elite Four. Not only does this allow me to avoid grinding as much as possible, but in order to unlock the National Dex, I need to see every Pokemon in the Sinnoh Dex. The only way to do this without going out of my way to evolve a ton of Pokemon is to encounter them in trainer battles. After arriving in Jubilife, I headed north to the Ravage Path to catch a Zubat. Zubat is one of the many Pokemon that require maximum friendship to evolve, so the earlier I add it to the team, the better. Just before I exited Oreburgh Gate, Chimchar evolved into Monferno. When I reached the city proper, I ran to Route 207 to catch a Machop. This Machop won't count for the Dex because I immediately traded it for Kaza the Abra. While I can catch Abra in the wild, this one will level up faster since it was received from a trade, and Alakazam is a really useful Pokemon. After sweeping Rourke's gym with a single monkey, I headed to Floroma Town where I grabbed the Pluck TM for Zubat. Since Zubat doesn't learn a flying type move until level 17, this made it way easier to level up. I then beat Mars in the Valley Windworks, where I could now catch the static Drifloon on the next available Friday. This is the reason I started my game on a Thursday night. However, I underestimated how quickly I could get to this point in the game, so I decided to come back in a couple hours after the clock hit midnight. And if you're wondering why I didn't just start my game on a Friday, it's because if you beat Mars on a Friday, you have to wait until the next Friday to get Drifloon. Once in Eterna Forest, I decided to take advantage of Cheryl to get the most out of my time there. Throughout the game, there are 5 areas where you can partner with an NPC trainer. This trainer will not only keep you fully healed until you part ways, but they also cause every wild encounter to be a double battle. I used this to catch every available Pokemon in Eterna Forest, and so I could level up Zubat since I didn't need to constantly run back to the Pokemon Center. But before catching any Pokemon in the area, I left an open slot on my party for a wild Baniri. Baniri is another friendship evolution, so I wanted to add it to my team as soon as possible. What makes Baniri stand out apart from the other friendship evolutions is that her base friendship level is 0. For reference, Pokemon need a friendship level of 225 to evolve, and most start with a base friendship level of about 70. So this cute little bunny just straight up hates you. This probably explains why she's one of the few Pokemon to learn frustration through level up. At the end of the forest, Cheryl gave me the Soothe Bell, which makes a Pokemon's friendship level increase quicker than normal. For now, I gave it to Zubat, but I would give it to Baniri once Zubat was fully evolved. After grabbing the Explorer Kit, which will be useful later, I defeated all the trainers around Eterna until Zubat evolved into Golbat. This made it super easy to sweep Gardenia, and I grabbed an easy second badge. Before taking on Jupiter, I ran back to the Valley Windworks and caught the static Drifloon now that it was Friday in-game. Somehow in my 17 years of playing the Sinnoh games, I've never gotten Drifloon in this game, so it was cool to finally get. Back in Eterna, I defeated Jupiter, got the Togepi egg from Cynthia, got the bike, and got the EXP share from Rowan's aid as I passed through the Cycling Road. While I was battling the trainers on Cycling Road, Abra evolved into Kadabra. Once I made it back to Oreburgh, I decided to boot up Pearl so I could trade my Kadabra to get its evolution. I started with Piplup this time, quickly got to the point where I could trade, and evolved Kadabra into Alakazam. Back in Platinum, I went to the lower level of Oreburgh Gate to get the Brick Break TM from Monferno. While I was down there, I caught another Zubat and a level 10 Golbat to complete the entire line. That's right, technically you can catch a Golbat before getting a single gym badge in this game. Outside of Mount Coronet, I ran into Dawn again, who gave me the Versus Seeker, which in my opinion is the best key item in the entire series. Shortly after I arrived in Hearthome, I entered Amity Square just so I could get the Amulet coin, which makes money grinding really easy. After hatching the Togepi egg and grabbing a free Eevee from Bebe, I stormed Fantina's gym for badge number 3. It took a few resets, but I was eventually able to take her down. My next stop was the Salacion Ruins, where I grabbed a few Evolution Stones and the HM for Defog. Just after I left Salacion Town, Golbat finally evolved into Crobat. In Veilstone, I got the gift Porygon from the NPC in the house above the Pokemon Center, and swept Maylene for the 4th badge. Beating Maylene means that I now have access to Fly, which makes traversing the region much more enjoyable. South of Veilstone is Pastoria City, and on the way there, Monferno evolved into Infernape. Reaching Pastoria means I now have access to the 2 best Pokeballs in the game. Quick Balls have a heightened chance of catching Pokemon on the first turn of battle, while Dusk Balls have a heightened chance of catching Pokemon at night or in dark areas. The downside is that all the special Pokeballs in the Gen 4 games cost $1,000 apiece. So I needed a good chunk of cash if I was going to fill out my decks. And thankfully, there's a great spot close by to fill up my wallet. Just outside of the Backlot Mansion on the northern part of Route 212 is Gentleman Bobby and Socialite Reina. Each of them only have 1 Pokemon apiece, and with the Amulet coin, they give out tens of thousands of dollars each per battle. They can be infinitely rematched with a Versus Seeker, and as you progress through the game, their Pokemon continues to get stronger and the amount of money they give out gets bigger as well. I was able to kill 2 birds with 1 stone, since I needed to get Alakazam leveled up a bit to take on Crasher Wake. After robbing the elderly, I grabbed most of the Pokemon available in the Trophy Garden, except for the elusive 10% Pikachu, and ended the first day of the challenge with 39 Pokemon in the Living Dex so far. The next day, I was busy working on the Nuzlocke Roulette video, thanks for the support on that by the way, so I decided to get started on a passive but very necessary task. Across the Sinnoh region are these golden trees known as honey trees. If you slaughter them with honey and wait about 6 hours, a Pokemon will appear. And yes, you really need to wait 6 hours. While you can date skip for certain things, the game detects if you've slathered honey on trees and will make you wait an extra 24 hours. So I slathered all the trees available to me in the morning and came back for them later in the day. It's also important to note that once a Pokemon appears in a honey tree, the species is permanent until you slather honey again and wait another 6 hours. But everything about the Pokemon, including its gender, ability, IVs, etc., can be re-rolled by saving and soft resetting the game. This is useful since I need at least 1 female Combee and both a male and female Burmy to complete their evolution lines. On this first pass of honey trees, I caught a female Burmy, 2 Apom, and 2 Combee, one of which is female so I can evolve it into Vespiquen. I didn't reset my honey trees because I figured I could just breed for the other 2 Burmy I need later on, but I completely forgot about Cherubi. Thankfully, it's available in the Headbutt trees in Soul Silver, so I decided to get it there. And before you ask, no, I am not getting Heracross or Munchlax through the honey trees. There are way easier methods of getting both of these later on. On Route 212, I caught a male Kirlia, which can evolve into the ultimate catching machine, Gallade. Gallade can learn both False Swipe and Hypnosis, which will be a huge help later on. But there's a catch. For some reason, neither Gardevoir or Gallade learn Hypnosis in Generation 4. Kirlia can learn Hypnosis, but it doesn't learn it until level 50. And for context, it will begin trying to evolve into Gardevoir at level 30, so for 20 levels you have to press B every time it tries to evolve. So for now, I stuck Kirlia in the daycare so it could start gaining experience and I wouldn't have to worry about canceling its evolution. Then I returned to Pastoria City, where after a couple of resets, I took down Crasher Wake for my next badge. After a quick detour to Celestic Town, I arrived in Canalave where I fought my rival on the bridge. Before heading to the gym, I backtracked to Floroma Town and surfed north to the Fuego Ironworks. I caught every Pokemon in the area, including a Magnemite which I would add to the team to help me out in the late game. Despite only playing for about an hour, I ended the second day of the challenge here with 51 Pokemon in the Dex. For the next couple of days, I was busy finishing the Nuzlocke Roulette video and I didn't get a chance to come back to the challenge until the 25th. So I wanted to make up for lost time. My goal for the day was to beat the game and unlock the National PokeDex so I could really start to make a dent in my Living Dex. To start the day, I took the boat to Iron Island so I could get the Riolu egg from Riley. I also made sure to leave an open space in my party so I wouldn't have to go through the cave a second time. While journeying through the cave, Magnemite evolved into Magneton thanks to the EXP share. Back on the mainland, I destroyed Byron's team and began the endgame Galactic Gauntlet. In about 20 minutes, I defeated Saturn at Lake Valor and Mars at Lake Verity, and then headed towards Snow Point City. While in Mount Coronet, I used a rare candy on Magneton to evolve it into Magnezone. Also on the way to Snow Point, I caught most of the ice types between routes 216 and 217, including Swinub, who was added to the team just because I love the whole evolution line. After Infernape soloed Candace's team, I returned to Veilstone to progress the story, and during the many galactic battles, Swinub evolved all the way into Mamoswine. With Cyrus and Saturn defeated and the Lake Trio freed, it was time to head for the Spear Pillar and take down Cyrus once and for all. Unfortunately, the devil, you know, that guy from the Bible, had beef with Cyrus too and pulled him into the Distortion World. I remember thinking the Distortion World was super cool as a kid, but as an ancient 26-year-old, it just makes me motion sick and frustrated since I can never remember the right way to get to Cyrus. Eventually, I reached the end of the road and entered the final fight with Cyrus. It took a reset and a bunch of healing items, but I finally defeated the leader of Team Galactic, which meant it was time to fight the renegade Pokemon itself, Giratina. It took me half an hour and several soft resets, but I finally caught Giratina and added it to the team. Sadly, the vastly superior Origin form is locked behind the postgame. On the plus side, I can now catch the Lake Trio. Kinda makes freeing them earlier pointless, doesn't it?
Thank you.
Nerdy
Has freed us.
Oh, I wouldn't say free. More like under new management.
In Verity Cavern, Mesprit teleported away, which introduces roaming Pokemon. Roamers can appear in any route throughout the region and will teleport somewhere else anytime you enter a new area. The best way to track them down, in my opinion, is to use the PokeTracker Poketch app and go back and forth between Jubilife and Route 203 until both you and the roamer are on the same route. In less than 10 minutes, I encountered Mesprit and decided to use my Master Ball on it for an easy capture. From there, it only took about 15 minutes to catch Azelf and Yuxi, which thankfully weren't roamers, and it was time to finish the rest of the story. After collecting the final badge from Volkner, I headed towards Victory Road, and along the way, I caught a level 50 Tentacruel that will help get me through the Elite Four. In about half an hour, I made it through the cave, but I wanted to take care of a quick side quest before entering the league. The Curly I put in the daycare earlier wasn't gaining as much EXP as I wanted it to, so I decided I'd let it gain EXP in the league while holding the Lucky Egg. The Lucky Egg increases a Pokemon's EXP yield and is a very rare item prior to Generation 5. The only way to get one is by stealing it from Wild Chansey, which is easier said than done. Chansey is a 5% encounter on routes 209 and 210, and it only has a 5% chance to hold a Lucky Egg. While I can't do anything about its low encounter rate, I can improve the chances of it holding a Lucky Egg. I took a quick detour to the Great Marsh where I caught 2 Yanma. Yanma has the ability Compound Eyes, which increases the accuracy of moves in battle. But out of battle, it makes wild Pokemon more likely to hold an item. This improves the chance of Chansey holding a Lucky Egg up to 20%. But since Chansey also has a 50% chance to hold an Oval Stone, that means I'll probably get multiple Oval Stones before getting a single Lucky Egg. The last thing I needed to do was teach Yanma Thief, so I didn't have to catch every single Chansey, but I plan to catch 2 anyway for the Living Dex. It took me about 14 minutes to encounter my first Chansey, which by a sheer stroke of luck was holding the Lucky Egg. I was honestly prepared to never find one because when I was looking up the best ways to get Lucky Eggs online, I saw multiple horror stories about people thieving dozens of Oval Stones before getting a single Lucky Egg. I also got this Chansey in a luxury ball to make evolving it with friendship easier later on. After entering the league, it took me about an hour and plenty of resets to conquer the Elite Four in Cynthia, and I rolled credits in about 15.5 hours. This is really slow, but considering I spent time filling up my decks while playing the story, I wasn't too worried about it. This is one big task off my to-do list, but I had one more left for the day: unlocking the National Dex. As I mentioned earlier, you need to see every Pokemon in the Sinnoh Dex in order to unlock the National Dex. Out of the 210 Pokemon in Platinum's Dex, I was only missing 20 entries. To avoid having to go out of my way to catch these Pokemon, I looked up where I could encounter them in trainer battles on Cerebi, and made my way around Sinnoh to find them all. After an hour and a half, I registered 208 Pokemon in the Sinnoh Dex, which is all the Pokemon you can encounter via the main story, trainer battles, or through normal wild encounters. So which 2 am I missing? The first is Rotom. Unlike the more recent games, Rotom in Platinum is a once per save file encounter that's exclusive to the old Chateau. If you enter at night and thump the TV upstairs, you can encounter the little guy. With just one quick ball I caught it, which meant there was just one Pokemon left. The last Pokemon in the Sinnoh Dex is Manaphy, who is a mythical Pokemon that can't be encountered normally. The only way to register it for the Dex without owning one is to go to Mr. Backlot's room in the mansion and look at his book on the desk behind him. This means I now have every Sinnoh Pokemon registered in my Dex. And before you ask, yes, I will be eventually getting Manaphy later in this challenge. After showing my completed Dex to Rowan, I not only got the National Dex, but I also got the Poke Radar, which is a nifty little item I'll talk about more in a bit. The last thing I did was return to the Distortion World via Turnback Cave, where I grabbed the Grisius Orb to transform Giratina back to its origin form. With that all done, I had achieved my goals for the day and had reached 85 Pokemon for the Living Dex. On the next day, I decided to take care of collecting all of the event Pokemon that can only be obtained through Mystery Gift. During the initial release of Diamond, Pearl, and Platinum, there were a handful of distribution events that were either sent out through Wi-Fi or were hosted at stores like Toys R Us and GameStop. These events were limited to at most a few days, meaning in the year of our Lord 2024, these events have long been shut down. But there is still a way to access them. By adjusting your Wi-Fi settings, you can use a method called the DNS exploit to connect to fan-made servers that have all of the Generation 4 and 5 events available to download. There's no way to specifically target one event, so you'll have to try over and over again to get the one you want. But it's still really cool that there's a sort of legit way to grab these event Pokemon in 2024. Through this exploit, I obtained Regigigas, Celebi, Jirachi, the Oak Slider, the member card, and the secret key. I was still missing a couple of the events I needed, but since I had spent over an hour just to get these, I decided to come back later on. After hacking the Matrix to get some 20-year-old Pokemon, I made my way back to Mount Coronet and entered a room locked behind the Waterfall HM. Inside were the Adam and Illustrious Orbs, which are needed to summon the other 2/3 of the Creation Trio. This causes 2 space-time rifts to open up the Spear Pillar that let me encounter Dialga and Palkia. I was able to catch them both super quickly since they are some of the easiest legendaries to catch in the whole series. Before doing anything else, I decided to organize my boxes so all future catches can be dropped into the proper place. This isn't really necessary, and it might have been better to wait to do this until I was all done, but the disorganization of my boxes was starting to bug me, so I preferred to do it now. Now that my boxes were ready for some new residents, it was time to finish leveling up my catching machine. I spent a couple of hours battling Fisherman Cole on Route 222 over and over, and eventually my Kirlia hit level 50 and learned Hypnosis. With a Dawnstone I picked up a while ago, Kirlia evolved into Gallade. Even though I was itching to start catching some Pokemon, I had one last errand to take care of. After hopping on the boat in Snow Point City, I arrived at the battle zone and had a quick multi-battle against Volkner and Flint. This let me grab the Super Rod from the fisherman, and it was time to start filling up the decks. Now, in hindsight, I should have explored the whole post-game island first before going on a catching spree, but at the time, I wanted to catch everything on the mainland first before exploring the new areas. Using my spreadsheet, I went area by area, catching Pokemon with all of the methods I had available. On Route 214, I went for my first Poke Radar exclusive Pokemon. When you use the Poke Radar on a patch of grass, up to 4 grass patches will start to shake. When a grass patch shakes quicker than the rest, that means you can encounter an exclusive Pokemon from it. In the case of Route 214, the Radar exclusive was Poochyena, so I grabbed 2 of those. After you defeat or catch a Poke Radar Pokemon, more grass patches will shake when the battle's over. If you go to the patch that's the furthest away, but isn't on the edge of the grass tiles, you'll have a decent chance of encountering the same Pokemon again, which will start a chain. Once you reach a chain of 40, you'll have a 1 in 200 chance of encountering a shiny patch, which will let you encounter a shiny Pokemon. I didn't really care about this right now, but being able to chain these exclusive Pokemon makes it really easy to get all the duplicates I needed for their evolutions. In just an hour, my total jumped to 106 Pokemon, and that doesn't even include the extra Pokemon I needed to evolve later. But the Poke Radar isn't the only way to catch exclusive Pokemon. After obtaining the National Dex, you could talk to Mr. Backlot, and every day he will tell you about a special Pokemon that has appeared in his trophy garden. The only daily Pokemon I needed was Castform, but there are a few that I can grab here that would help me avoid breeding later on. Like Igglybuff, who was the daily Pokemon the first time I talked to Mr. Backlot. The really cool thing about the daily Trophy Garden Pokemon is that you can save before talking to Backlot and soft reset to get a different Pokemon. No other daily event in the Gen 4 games works like this, so this makes it really easy to find the Pokemon you want. For the next hour and 45 minutes, I ran around the region catching Pokemon through all available methods and finished the day with 120 Pokemon in my Living Dex. For the next 2 days, my goal was to finish as much of Platinum as I could so I could start working on the other games. On the 27th, I decided to get started with the daily Swarm Pokemon, which I was very much dreading. If you talk to Dawn's sister in Sandgem Town, she'll tell you about a Pokemon Swarm and where to find it. Thankfully, I only needed 3 swarms, and it just so happens that the Skitty Swarm I got first was one of them. After grabbing 2 Skitty on Route 222, I checked in with Mr. Backlot, who happened to have an Eevee outbreak in his garden. By using the Poke Radar, I chained for Eevee to catch several in a row, which saved me from having to breed for the Eeveelutions later on. This also allows me to catch 2 of them in Luxury Balls, which will make getting Espeon and Umbreon through Friendship way easier. Then it was time to catch one of the most annoying Pokemon in the entire series, Feebas. On the bottom floor of Mount Coronet, there's a large lake that is made up of 528 water tiles, and in just 4 out of those 528 tiles, Feebas can appear. The worst part is that the 4 tiles are reshuffled every day, so there's no way to know which ones house Feebas. Not only that, but Feebas is only a 50% encounter, so even if you fish in the same spot several times, with just a little bit of bad luck, you can miss your Feebas tile. The only advice I could give is to start at the top and work your way down while fishing in each spot 2 or 3 times. Now I know I've spent this whole section complaining, but I got incredibly lucky as the very last tile on the top row of the lake was one of my Feebas tiles. So after 20 minutes, I added Feebas to the decks. And since you could get as many Feebas as you want from your Feebas tile until they're reshuffled, I caught a handful of them to try to get one that likes Dry Poffins. Dry Poffins increase a Pokemon's beauty stat, and a Feebas needs maximum beauty to evolve into Milotic. One of my Feebas had a quiet nature, which boosts special attack, meaning it prefers Dry Poffins. Thankfully, I could just buy a bunch of Dry Poffins from the Veilstone department store, but I had spent all of my money on Pokeballs and Repels, so I needed to money grind for a bit before I could buy them. During this process, Baneri finally warmed up to me and evolved into Lopunny. I then returned to Veilstone to buy the Poffins I needed. After stuffing my fish full of Dry Poffins, its beauty stat maxed out and it evolved into Milotic. So remember earlier when I recommended that one of your DSs should have a GBA slot? Well, these next few encounters are partially why. Once you unlock the National Dex, if you have Pokemon Ruby, Sapphire, Emerald, Fire Red, or Leaf Green in the GBA slot, special Pokemon will appear depending on which game you have in. Almost all of the GBA mons can be caught in Heart Gold and Soul Silver, but it is way more convenient to catch them here. Unfortunately, I could only use Ruby, Sapphire, and Fire Red, as my Emerald copy is packed away in a storage unit right now, and my Leaf Green is a reproduction cart, which I didn't know when I bought it. So if you add up the 3 GBA games I use, it would cost $265, which brings the total up to roughly $735. But if you want to buy Leaf Green and Emerald as well, it brings the total cost to $1,085. It's also important to note that if you plan to use the GBA games in any capacity, they need to be the same language as the DS game you want it to connect to. So for example, a North American copy of Emerald won't be compatible with a Japanese copy of Platinum or vice versa. While most of the GBA mon makes sense, like Growlithe for Fire Red and Lotad for Sapphire, there's one encounter that stands out above the rest. If you have any of the Pokemon GBA games inserted into your DS and you go to this specific room of the old chateau, you can encounter Gengar. This was the only way you could catch a Gengar without evolving Haunter until Pokemon Sun and Moon released in 2016. Not only is that pretty cool, but Gengar is guaranteed to be level 17. I always love catching Pokemon at levels they shouldn't be at. I have a list in my head of illegal level Pokemon I want to shiny hunt, so maybe I'll return one day for the shiny underlevel Gengar. After about 2 hours, I caught all of the GBA Pokemon outside of the post-game island, so it was now time to take care of the final task of mainland Sinnoh. For now. In a house in Canalave, a young boy is trapped in a never-ending nightmare. To help him, his father took me to Full Moon Island, where I encountered Cresselia. While she teleported away for now, I had an idea of how I could catch her as quickly as possible. Just like with Mesprit, I biked in and out of Jubilife until Cresselia and I were both on Route 203. Over the course of several battles, I chipped away at Cresselia's HP until I got it down to 1 with Gallade's False Swipe. By putting it to sleep with Hypnosis, Cresselia can still flee, and upon encountering it again, it will still be asleep. So by finding it one more time and using a Quick Ball, I was easily able to add Cresselia to my dex. To end the night, I returned to the post-game island and began making my way through the new routes while catching Pokemon. I ended up in the resort area, where I picked things up the next day. I started by grabbing 2 Lombre and 2 Nuzleaf, who were the last GBA Pokemon I needed. It was then time to take care of the Stark Mountain Galactic event, which is the final story mission in the game. It only took about 30 minutes to thwart Charon's plans, and immediately after, I grabbed every Pokemon available in Stark Mountain. After a quick meeting with Buck in the fight area, I returned to Stark Mountain and encountered Heatran. It took about 11 minutes, but with Heatran caught, I had now caught every legendary Pokemon you can catch in Pokemon Platinum. Kind of. Remember earlier when I said I got Regigigas through Mystery Gift? Well, this isn't just any Regigigas. This is the movie Regigigas that was originally distributed in North America through Toys R Us. This event was exclusively for Diamond and Pearl, as Platinum hadn't been released yet. But if you traded the Regigigas over to Platinum, you could unlock something cool. In 3 locations throughout Pokemon Platinum, there are these empty chambers that only have a single item. One in Iron Island, one in Mount Coronet, and one on Route 227. These chambers normally will remain vacant unless you have this event Regigigas with you. Bringing Regigigas to these chambers will make these strange dots appear on the floor. If you step on all of the dots and interact with the statue at the end of the room, you'll encounter one of the original Regis depending on which chamber you're in. Registeel for the Iron Ruins, Regice for the Iceberg Ruins, and Regirock for the Rock Peak Ruins. This is really cool, but it does raise an interesting question. In Diamond and Pearl, if you take the 3 Regis to the basement of Stone Point Temple, you can encounter Regigigas. So in Platinum, if you use Regigigas to catch the Regi Trio, what awaits you in Snow Point Temple? Well, if you reach the temple's basement, you'll immediately see that Regigigas is still there. But what makes this Regigigas special is that for some reason, it is only level 1. I don't know if there's some lore reason for this, but I just love the thought of entering the home of an ancient godlike Pokemon, and he's just a little guy. And while I could have caught it now, I decided against it. Remember earlier when I said the second video in this trilogy would be a special side quest? This is that special side quest. I will, eventually, shiny hunt this level 1 Regigigas, and we'll make a video on it once I'm done. This may take a while, considering the shiny odds in Generation 4 are 1 in 8,192, but I am nothing if not persistent. Now that I was done dealing with these ancient Pokemon, it was time to deal with these ancient Pokemon. Using the Explorer Kit, you can explore the Sinnoh Underground and dig up special items, including fossils. Before unlocking the National Dex, you can only find one kind of fossil in Platinum, and it depends on your trainer ID. Because the last digit of my trainer ID was odd, that meant I could dig up skull fossils, which could be revived into Cranidos. This means I'd have to dig up armor fossils for Shieldon and Pearl later on. After unlocking the National Dex, you can find the Gens 1 and 3 fossils, though they are slightly more rare than the Sinnoh ones. In a couple of hours, I found all of the fossils I needed, except for the dome fossils for Kabuto and Kabutops. Because I was sick of digging in the underground, I decided to just get them in Soul Silver. At this point, I was starting to get burnt out on playing Platinum, so I decided I needed a change of scenery. A worse version of Sinnoh. It was finally time to play Pokemon Pearl for the version exclusives, but there was something I wanted to do first. In Pokemon Platinum, I caught 5 Pachirisu with the pickup ability and trained them all to level 21. Pokemon with pickup have a 10% chance to pick up an item after every battle, and at level 21 they have a 4% chance of picking up a rare candy. This comes out to a 0.4% chance for each Pachirisu to pick up a rare candy after every battle. I traded these Pachirisu over to Pearl in the hopes that I could get plenty of rare candies to make getting to the game super easy. And in all of my time playing Pearl, you want to know how many rare candies I got? 1. Just 1. So it's safe to say this was a major waste of time. On the first day of playing Pearl, I evolved Piplup into Primplup, made it to Eterna Forest, and caught 2 Mischievous, bringing the Living Dex total to a whopping 198 Pokemon. To start the day, I spent about an hour grinding in Eterna Forest before progressing the story. As soon as I arrived in Eterna, I grabbed the Explorer Kit and started looking for 2 armor fossils. It only took me about 10 minutes to find one, but I really didn't feel like finding another, so I just decided to breed for the second Shieldon later. The final version exclusives I needed were the Glameow line, which are only able to be caught on Route 218. You need Surf to get to the grass patch on Route 218, which means I needed to get the first 5 badges of the game in order to catch everything I needed. The only things of note that happened along the way were my Prinplup evolving into Empoleon, and an NPC in Hearthome giving me a Happiny egg. On Route 218, I caught 2 Glameow, so I'm all done with Pokemon Pearl, right? Not even close. In Generation 4, every single mythical Pokemon is obtainable either through Mystery Gift or through an in-game event unlocked with a Mystery Gift item. Except for one. The original mythical itself, Mew. Mew is notorious for being one of the rarest Pokemon of all time. The only way to catch it in any game is on Faraway Island and Emerald, but this was locked behind a limited distribution event that never left Japan. It would take until 2021 with the release of Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl for there to be a reliable way of obtaining Mew without a distribution event. But obviously that doesn't help us out in Gen 4. So while it might seem like there's no way to get Mew from my Living Dex, I have a friend who can help us out. Hey Nikki, I could really use your help. I'm currently completing a national Living Dex in Pokemon Platinum. I need a Mew, but I don't know how to get one legitimately. Do you know where I can get one? Oh my god, thank you Nikki, you're a lifesaver. Hey, so remember when you said that the COVID vaccine would make men's testicles explode? What the fuck was that about? My Pokemon Ranch was a WiiWare title released shortly after Pokemon Diamond and Pearl. The main appeal is that you can connect your Gen 4 Pokemon games to My Pokemon Ranch and store your Pokemon on your Wii. But for some reason, you can only withdraw Pokemon from the same game you deposited them from, which in my opinion kind of defeats the whole purpose of the game. But I'm interested in Ranch for a different reason. The main character, Haley, will occasionally offer you a trade. After depositing a certain amount of Pokemon, she offers to trade you a Phione for a Leafeon. And after depositing even more Pokemon, she will eventually offer to trade you a Mew for an egg. This sounds like a pretty good deal. 2 mythicals for a dog and an egg. But as I'm sure some of you are aware, there's a pretty big catch. In order for Haley to offer you Phione, you need to deposit 250 Pokemon into My Pokemon Ranch. This isn't too bad, and you can probably catch that amount of Pokemon in a couple of hours. But to get the trade for Mew, you need to deposit 999 Pokemon. Let me remind you, in Generation 4, there are only 493 individual Pokemon, and in one copy of Diamond, Pearl, or Platinum, the most you can have in your PC boxes is 540. This is obviously a lot of effort just for one Pokemon, but surely between Platinum and Pearl, I could get this done pretty quickly, right? Nope. You see, My Pokemon Ranch was updated post-launch to be compatible with Pokemon Platinum, as the base game was only compatible with Diamond and Pearl. But the Platinum update only released for the Japanese version of Ranch, which isn't compatible with North American copies of any Gen 4 game. So My Pokemon Pearl would have to go it alone this time around. No matter how you go about it, catching 1,000 Pokemon, even if you just catch the same Pokemon over and over again, is going to take a very long time. So you'll want to do this as efficiently as possible. Step 1 is to find the easiest Pokemon to catch, which to no surprise are the early game Pokemon on routes 201 and 202. With a Quick Ball, every Pokemon on these routes has a 99 to 100% catch rate, so the next step is to get your hands on 999 Quick Balls. Each Quick Ball is $1,000 a pop, meaning you'll need $999,000 to get them all. The good news is that the gentleman and socialite outside Backlot's mansion are present in Diamond and Pearl, but the bad news is that since I haven't beaten the game, they give out way less money even with the amulet coin. Thankfully, it still only took me about an hour to get the money I needed, and I was all stocked up on Quick Balls. I ended the day by trading my Pearl exclusives to Platinum and would come back tomorrow to start catching Pokemon for My Pokemon Ranch. The next day was July 30th, and I realized I forgot to get a Diamond and Pearl exclusive event Pokemon through Mystery Gift. In 2008, Deoxys was distributed through GameStop, and back in the day, I actually attended this event. I remember I was on vacation with my family, and we just so happened to stop at a mall with a GameStop. At the time, I brought my DS with me everywhere, so I was excited to find out that the distribution event was going on. Sadly, this Deoxys is one of my many event Pokemon that preteen me deleted on a whim, so it felt good to get it back. Supposedly, you can download Deoxys via the DNS exploit that I used earlier, but after hours of cycling through events, it never popped up for me. So I decided to take a different approach. For in-store events, Nintendo would send out a special Nintendo DS as well as a special cartridge that would distribute the event. The cards were supposed to be sent back to Nintendo to be destroyed, but many of them ended up being resold online despite the big red text advising against that. These event cards are very valuable, which has caused people to make reproduction cards to scam people, so I'm not too keen to buy one for myself. But just like any DS game, the event cards contain a DS ROM, and thanks to Professor Oak himself, all of the Gen 4 and 5 event cartridges have been dumped online. You'll either need a DS flash card or a modded 3DS to run it, but through this method, I easily obtained the GameStop Deoxys. After trading Deoxys to Platinum, I booted up my Pokemon Ranch for the first time and transferred over what few Pokemon I had in my PC boxes. It was then time to start catching Pokemon. In about 4 hours, I had caught 470 Pokemon, so I was hoping that in the next day or so, I could get my Mew. But on the beginning of the 31st, I made a terrible discovery. You can only send over a certain amount of Pokemon per day until you unlock the biggest ranch size. After checking some guides, I discovered it'd take almost a week to be able to deposit all 999 Pokemon. So for now, I decided I'd finish filling up my PC boxes and would transfer Pokemon over every day until I had Mew. In about an hour, I'd completely filled my PC and decided it was time to take care of Pokemon Diamond. Diamond is by far the easiest game in the challenge because all 5 Pokemon I needed could be obtained before reaching Hearthome City. After grabbing Turtwig from Rowan's briefcase, it only took me an hour to reach Eterna Forest and catch 2 Murkrow. In another hour, I defeated Gardenia in the Eterna Gym, Jupiter in the Galactic Building, and made it to Route 206 where I caught 2 Stunky. I then traded everything over to Platinum, and I was all done with Pokemon Diamond. August was officially here, and with the new month, I made a fantastic discovery. While I was depositing some Pokemon into my Pokemon Ranch, I wondered if I could just change the day forward on my Wii to upgrade my ranch faster. And sure enough, it worked! In no time at all, I deposited all 500 plus Pokemon I had, and Haley offered to trade me her Fio. In Platinum, I bred 2 of the Eevee I caught earlier until I had 2 eggs. I hatched one of them and evolved it into Leafeon, but kept the other an egg so I could trade it from you later. After trading them both to Pearl, I dropped them into Ranch and traded Haley for her Fio. Knowing that you could date skip to unlock Ranch upgrades was a pleasant surprise and made me want to get this done. But I decided I wouldn't record it since I was just doing the same thing over and over. But of course, something happened that made me wish I'd been recording. Okay, so for context, I am currently at the point in my Platinum Living Dex challenge where I am dumping a shit ton of Pokemon into Pokemon Pearl. And I was like, you know what? For the last half where I have to fill up my boxes again to get to the 999 mark from you, I was like, I'm not going to record this. Nothing interesting happens. I'm just filling up my hard drive. I found a freaking shiny Starly. I was like doing this in the background while focusing on other stuff, and I just heard the ping. I thought a shiny might happen. I really did. Oh, this is so cool. I already have a shiny Starly that I caught in Platinum, actually, and I evolved it to Staraptor. Well, Quick Ball actually kind of can work with shiny Staraptor because of the blue, like, hair thing it's got going on. Oh, man. And I was also hoping I would find a shiny at some point during this Living Dex challenge. Shiny Starly. Again, I really wish I had been recording when I found this, but either way, cool find. Alright, so that's a normal Starly. Shiny Starly. Oh, this is so cool. So I'm probably, just in case I run into another shiny, I'm going to record the rest of this. Sadly, I did not find another shiny, but with one last push, I had managed to catch the rest of the Pokemon I needed. After dumping them into Ranch, I traded my Eevee egg for Mew, and was finally done with my Pokemon Ranch. Owning Mew in Gen 4 feels so cool to me. This is the first time I've owned a legitimate Mew prior to Let's Go Eevee, so this one definitely will hold a special place in my heart. Oh, and if you're wondering how long this took, it took me about 14 hours to catch all of the Pokemon for Ranch. This doesn't even include the 7.5 hours I had already spent playing Pearl to get the Pokemon for my Living Dex. There were some things I could have done to make this go faster, like having a Pokemon with Illuminate to get more encounters, or playing Diamond up to where I could get Quick Balls so I could do this on 2 games, but I honestly just didn't feel like it. Now, how this game impacts the price total is a little complicated. A Wii itself will only run you about $50 if you order it online, but you could probably find it for cheaper from a retro game store. But putting a price on My Pokemon Ranch is a bit more complicated. Being a WiiWare title, My Pokemon Ranch could only be purchased from the Wii's online store for 500 Wii points or $5 US. And since the Wii's online servers were deactivated a decade ago, there's no way you can purchase it for yourself anymore. On a completely unrelated note, Did you know it's surprisingly easy to mod your Wii? At this point, it was pretty late in the day, so I decided to take care of a few more things in Platinum before taking a break. I ran around checking honey trees I had slathered earlier, but the only thing I caught was a male Burmy. While I was checking honey trees, it just so happened to be Friday in my game, so another static Drifloon was hanging out outside the Valley Windworks. My plan was to breed for a second Drifloon, but I just decided to get it here. Finally, I decided to take care of the last two swarms I needed, Electrike and Beldum. While swarms reset every day, there's a way to skip forward to get the swarm you want. Just changing the date on your DS won't work, but if you set the time on your DS to 11:59 PM and boot into the game before the clock rolls over to midnight, the game will update daily events as normal and you can get a new swarm. There are 22 potential swarms in Platinum, so getting the one you want is pretty unlikely. But once again, I got extremely lucky, and on my first reset, I got the Electrike swarm at the Valley Windworks. But my luck didn't stop there, because after catching 2 Electrike, I got the Beldum swarm immediately after, and was all done with swarms in Platinum. I've seen people reset for hours to get their desired swarm, so I will definitely take this over finding another shiny while recording. The next day, it was time to get started on Heart Gold and Soul Silver. I decided I would take on Soul Silver first and get a majority of the Pokemon I needed from this one game. So Heart Gold would mainly be used to catch version exclusives and to get the other Johto starters. After grabbing Totodile from Elm's lab, my goal was to beat the game as soon as possible, then go back and catch everything I needed. On my first day of playing, I reached and defeated Whitney while catching a few Pokemon here and there. The only things of note that happened were hatching Togepi from Elm's egg, catching a Ditto which will be used for breeding later, and getting Kenya the Spearow, which I'm supposed to deliver to a guy on Route 31. I will never deliver Kenya the Spearow to the guy on Route 31. I started the next day by catching the static Sudowoodo on Route 36 and unlocking the roaming beast immediately after. After beating Eggertig's gym leader, I headed towards Olivine City. Just outside of the city, I met the owner of the Johto Safari Zone, Baoba, who I hate with every fiber of my being. I'll explain why in a bit. The next half hour consisted of stealing this man's Shuckle, defeating Chuck at the Cyanwood Gym, and defeating Jasmine in the Olivine Gym. Before getting the next badge, I had to stop at the Lake of Rage to catch the red Gyarados. I could have easily caught Gyarados in Platinum, but I knew before I started this challenge that I wanted the red Gyarados for my Living Dex. I spent the rest of the day finishing the main story until I got the Master Ball from Elm. After a quick detour, I caught the roaming Raikou, but it would take a bit for me to catch the other two Johto beasts. To help me out in the Elite Four, and to get through Kanto as quickly as possible, I traded over my Dialga, Giratina, and Gallade from Platinum. The last thing I did on this day was head to the World Islands to catch the box legendary of Soul Silver, Lugia. It took about 12 minutes and several resets, but I caught Lugia and finished the day with 225 Pokemon in my Living Dex. I then spent the next 9 days finishing up everything I needed from Soul Silver. I could have done this way faster, but I was starting to get a little burnt out, so for a few days there, I was only playing for about an hour or two per day. Within an hour of starting the next day, I reached the champion and finished the main story just short of 8 hours. After a quick boat ride, I arrived in Kanto and started working on the postgame. As much as I would have loved to just sweep the Kanto gym leaders, I had to take care of a quick side quest. Upon visiting the Kanto power plant, I discovered that a key component had been stolen. This led me to the Cerulean Gym, where I found a Team Rocket Grunt who didn't get the memo that their team had been disbanded. With the power plant component retrieved and Kanto's power grid back online, I talked to this gentleman at the Kanto radio tower and got the radio expansion card. With the Kanto radio unlocked, I was able to awaken the sleeping Snorlax and catch it shortly after. Catching Snorlax here means I can just breed for a Munchlax, which lets me avoid having to catch one of the rarest Pokemon in Generation 4. Between the rest of the day, as well as the next, I finished collecting the Kanto gym badges and defeated Red in a little over 10 hours of gameplay. With the grunt work out of the way, it was time for the real grind. To start, I visited Professor Oak in Pallet Town, who gave me a choice of the Kanto starters. After picking the best one, I once again went down my spreadsheet and started catching everything I needed. During my catching spree, I checked the swarms and found that there was a Gulpin swarm on Route 3, which meant I wouldn't have to wait for Gulpin to appear in the Great Marsh. With a bunch of Pokemon from Soul Silver checked off, I decided to start going for the Headbutt Pokemon. There are several Pokemon that can only be obtained through Headbutt trees in this game, like Pineco, Execute, and Heracross, which saves me from having to get it through the Honey trees in Platinum. But after obtaining the National Dex, there are a handful of special trees unlocked that give out Pokemon that don't normally appear in Headbutt trees. Through these special trees, I got Tailo, Shroomish, Slackoth, and Cherubi, which meant I wouldn't have to go back for it in Platinum. You can actually find all of the Honey Tree Pokemon through Headbutt trees, except for Munchlax, but I've already got that covered. With only a few Pokemon left to get, I headed to the ruins of Alph to start looking for a Dome Fossil. Right by the entrance, there's 3 smashable rocks that can be refreshed every time you leave the area. While you're most likely to find shards, in Heart Gold you can find the Helix Fossil, while in Soul Silver you can find the Dome Fossil. It only took a few resets to get one Dome Fossil, but I just decided I'd breed for the second Kabuto later. Tyrogue was my next target, which is only available as a gift Pokemon in the bottom level of Mount Mortar. I reached the NPC in just a few minutes, but I had to go through a second time because I forgot to leave an open space in my party. This is the only way to get Tyrogue if you don't want to unlock the National Dex in Diamond and Pearl, so I'll have to breed for 3 more later to get all of its evolutions. In Vermilion City, I ran into Steven Stone, who told me about a wild Latios that was roaming the region. He'll tell you about a Latios if you're playing the opposite version, so I'll catch it when I play Heart Gold. Since I've already beaten Red, I can also find Steven again in the Silphco and get one of the Hoenn starters from him. After choosing Mudkip, it was time to hunt down Latios. All it took to find Latios was to bike in and out of Vermilion until it appeared on either routes 5 or 6. Since he's only level 35, it's really not that hard to catch him, so all I had to do was... Okay, I can explain. If you knock out a roaming Pokemon in Heart Gold or Soul Silver, all it takes to respawn them is to just rematch the Elite Four and beat the champion again. What's interesting about that is that everything about the Pokemon is re-randomized when they respawn. This can be used to shiny hunt the roamers, but what I'm interested in are its IVs. As a reminder, I don't just want to complete the Pokedex, I want to complete everything in Pokemon Platinum. This includes defeating all of the facilities at the Battle Frontier, which requires a competitively trained team to do. Latios is one of the few legendaries allowed in the Battle Frontier, so I wanted to get a good one. But as I'm sure most of you know, getting a good IV Pokemon in older Pokemon games is way harder than it is in Scarlet and Violet. That being said, there is a method I can use to get the exact nature and IVs I want when I respawn Latios. RNG manipulation. The randomness in early Pokemon games isn't actually that random. By using a couple of external tools, you can start your game on a predetermined seed and make the RNG work in your favor. This doesn't just include finding a specific species of Pokemon you want, everything about the Pokemon can be manipulated, including its stats, nature, ability, and even whether or not it's shiny. I'm not going to go into detail about how to pull this off, but I'll leave a link in the description to I'm a Blissey's tutorial series on how to RNG manipulate all of the Gen 4 games. To set this up, I needed to reach Lance's room and be one step away from entering the fight. After determining I was on the right seed, I had to progress my frames until I was one away from the Latios I wanted. And no joke, the best way to do that is with 2 Chadots. In Gen 4, Chadot's signature move, Chatter, can be used in the overworld to record a custom cry with a DS microphone. Seemingly at random, when you listen back to the recorded cry, it will play at different pitches. However, the order of the pitches is determined by your current seed. Each time you play the cry, it progresses your game by 1 frame, so I did this over and over until I was one away from my desired Latios. Once that was done, I ran into the fight and took out Lance. Almost an hour later, I reclaimed Latios, but I was disappointed to find out I had gotten the wrong one. But by double checking the application I was using, I found out I had missed the Latios I wanted by 1 frame. I must have either played one too many Chadot cries or done something to progress the frames when I entered the Lance fight. Either way, this Latios wasn't too bad, so I decided to just catch it. Thankfully, I had the chance to redeem myself because I also wanted to RNG manip the next legendary, Zapdos. Just like the Latios, Zapdos is a viable Pokemon on the Battle Frontier and is a great bulky special attacker. The setup for this is way less time consuming, but there is a pretty blatant problem. I have to catch the damn thing. Gen 1 legendaries are pretty hard to catch, but normally I wouldn't be too concerned since if I fail, I could just reset and try again. But if I were to reset here, I'd have to set up the entire manip from the beginning. Once you get the hang of it, setting up RNG manipulation isn't that bad, but it does take extremely precise timing that is super easy to mess up. Between setting up the manip and catching Zapdos, it took me an hour. But not only did I do everything on the first try, I also got the exact Zapdos I was looking for. With these 2 time-consuming tasks all done, I called it for the day and finished with 301 Pokemon in my Living Dex. My goal for the next day was to finish catching the remaining legendaries, but I was running low on Pokeballs and even lower on money. When I looked online to find the best place to grind money, I was surprised to learn that Gentleman Bobby and Socialite Reina have been dethroned as the richest NPCs in Gen 4. If you set your DS clock to a Tuesday between 10 AM and 8 PM, you can rematch Gentleman Alfred in the Olivine Lighthouse as many times as you want. Once you've beaten Red, and if you have the Amulet coin equipped on your Pokemon, Alfred gives out almost as much money as Bobby and Reina do combined. So in less than 30 minutes, I had all of the money I needed for the rest of the game, and it was time to get to catching. Over the course of 2 hours, I caught Articuno at the Seafoam Islands, Moltres in Mount Silver, and Mewtwo in Cerulean Cave. It then took me nearly an hour to track down Entei and finally catch it, but with that, I only had 1 legendary left from the first 2 generations. Even though Suicune is the third legendary beast, it's not a roaming Pokemon like the other two. Throughout the game, you run into Suicune in various locations until you encounter it on Route 14. Then you have to return to Route 25 just outside of Bell's cabin, where you can challenge it to a battle. It took me just 5 minutes to catch, which meant there was just one legendary Pokemon left. If you visit Mr. Pokemon after defeating Red, he will give you the blue orb if you're playing Heart Gold, and the red orb if you're playing Soul Silver. In my case, I got the red orb, and by taking it to the hidden tower, I encountered Groudon. Obviously, with the blue orb and Heart Gold, you'll encounter Kyogre, which I'll take care of later. I managed to catch Groudon just seconds before it struggled itself to death, and I had finished catching the legendary Pokemon. But there was still one major trial ahead of me. There's a good reason I said I hated the owner of the Safari Zone earlier. Not only is the Johto Safari Zone weirdly complicated, but the game does a horrible job at explaining how it works. So I will now explain to you how the Johto Safari Zone works in excruciating detail. After collecting your 6th badge, Balbo will call you to tell you that his brand new Safari Zone is open for business and that it's located west of Cianwood City. When you arrive there for the first time, Balbo will task you with catching a Geodude from the Safari Zone. When you show Balbo a Geodude, he'll tell you that he'll call you with a new test later. You then have to wait 3 hours for him to call. And from my experience, it doesn't seem like you can just turn off your DS and come back when 3 hours have passed. Don't quote me on this, but it seems like 3 hours of in-game time need to pass, which doesn't seem too bad until you realize you need Balbo to call you 5 times. So for most of them, I just left my DS running while I slept and came back to it the next morning. When he does call you again, he says he wants you to catch a Sandshrew, which isn't currently available in the Safari Zone. But by using the computer in the lobby, you can swap out each area of the Safari Zone with new areas that have new Pokemon. Not only is the desert area where I can catch Sandshrew, but it's also the home of the one evolution line I need from the Safari Zone, the Trapinch line. But sadly, getting Trapinch is easier said than done. The next call won't come until you beat the game and unlock the National Dex. When Balbo does call you, he'll tell you can now place special blocks in the Safari Zone. These blocks will cause special Pokemon to appear, which is how I can get my Trapinch. Trapinch requires peak blocks placed in the desert area, and its evolution Vibrava requires forest blocks. Sadly, neither of the blocks are available yet, so I had to wait for him to call 2 more times to get the ones I needed. Once I had all of the blocks, I should have been able to get my Trapinch, right? Nope. And this is the part that the game doesn't explain. You see, the blocks need to level up in order to call certain Pokemon, and the only way to level up your blocks is to wait in real time. Do you want to know how many days I'd have to wait for Trapinch? 30 days. The crazy part is, there are Pokemon that take even longer. Gible in the Rocky Beach biome takes 100 days to appear. So my first course of action was to look for a way to skip time. I followed one tutorial that suggested you could skip time by doing the midnight trick as many times as you need, as long as you let the clock hit 12:01 every time. It took me 2 hours to do this, only to discover that this method doesn't work on the 3DS apparently, and the comments of the video I followed were filled with people saying they couldn't get it to work on any model of DS. But I knew if I kept looking, I'd find a way to skip time that worked. And thankfully, I did. Linked in the description is a tutorial I followed by Riali that worked for me. If you just listen to the steps, it sounds like some playground rumor that your friend whose uncle works for Nintendo told you, but I assure you this works. Riali explains it all in his tutorial, so I won't go into the whole method. Essentially, by taking out your DS's battery, resetting the DS operating system, and waiting a full 24 hours, you can skip forward 99 years worth of time. This doesn't just give me access to Trapinch and Vibrava. With the right blocks placed, I now have access to every Pokemon in the Johto Safari Zone. And I know having to wait a whole day may be annoying, but it sure as hell beats waiting a month. With the forest blocks placed, I caught 2 Vibrava, and with the peak blocks placed, I caught a Trapinch. With that taken care of, I was all done with Soul Silver, so it was time to play Heart Gold. Over the next 2 days, I was able to take care of everything I needed to do in Pokemon Heart Gold. In just under 5.5 hours, I beat Lance, and in another hour and some change, I beat Red at the top of Mount Silver. The only Pokemon I picked up during the story were my starter Cyndaquil, a third Togepi from an egg to complete the line, and Ho-Oh at the top of Bell Tower. Once I beat Red, I had a very small list of exclusives and once per save file Pokemon to take care of. Among these were Bulbasaur from Professor Oak, Torchic from Steven, the Roman Latias, and the Kyogre from the Hidden Tower. With all the Pokemon caught, I traded everything over to Soul Silver to trade to Platinum later on. The last thing I had to do in Heart Gold was start a new save file to get Chikorita. I could also get Squirtle and Trico from the save file if I beat Red for a 3rd time, but that would take an additional 8 hours when I could just transfer these Pokemon up from the GBA games. Before I traded everything over to Platinum, I had one last thing to take care of. If you visit Professor Oak with both Groudon and Kyogre in your party, he'll give you the Jade Orb. By taking this jade orb back to the hidden tower, Rayquaza will appear. In no time at all, I caught the green guy and I was all done with Heart Gold and Soul Silver. I then spent the rest of the day trading everything over to Platinum. I'd already taken care of a decent amount of the trading while I was waiting for Trapinch, but this still took a long time. On the next day, August 16th, I realized it had been almost a full month since I started the challenge, so I wanted to get this done in the next few days. My specific goal for today was to finish getting every individual Pokemon so I could start the big grind the next day. To start, I transferred Squirtle from my copy of Fire Red through Pal Park. After unlocking the National Dex, you unlock the Pal Park, where you can perform catching shows with the Pokemon you transfer from the GBA games. You get a score based on how quickly you catch them, and you can even release the Pokemon after you're done and catch them again to go for a high score. I didn't really care about this though, so I just grabbed my Squirtle and moved on. You can also only transfer Pokemon from the GBA games once per day, so I'd have to come back the next day for Trico. While working on some Pokemon I forgot to grab earlier, I realized there was a pretty big Pokemon I was missing: Spiritomb. I like to think of Spiritomb as the pick-me Pokemon. No matter what game it's in, it always has to have a unique encounter method. In Diamond, Pearl, and Platinum, there's a black ball on Route 208 hiding in the corner of some trees. If you talk to him, he'll give you the odd keystone, but he doesn't explain where to put it. But on Route 209, there's a small tower of rocks with a hole that the odd keystone fits in. You can place the keystone here, but nothing will happen. That's because you need to interact with 32 people in the Sinnoh Underground for Spiritomb to appear. And does the game explain this at all to you? Of course not. Now, thankfully, you don't actually have to interact with 32 people in the Underground. If you interact with someone, leave the Underground, re-enter, and interact with them again, it'll count as interacting with a new person. So I set up my Platinum and Pearl copies and did this over and over until I was able to catch Spiritomb. Just like with Drifloon, I've never gotten one of these in Generation 4, so this was pretty cool even if the encounter method is really tedious. At this point, I had pretty much every Pokemon, but I still needed a few more Mythicals. And the first one I decided to go for requires playing one final game. Pokemon Ranger is the first in a trilogy of spin-off Pokemon titles for the DS that is single-handedly responsible for an entire generation of children breaking their touchscreens, myself included. While many people have fond memories of playing Pokemon Ranger, many just know it as the spin-off game that gives you a Manaphy egg. After you beat the main game, you can unlock a special event that allows you to distribute a Manaphy egg to any of the Gen 4 games. However, you can only do this once per cartridge. Not save file, cartridge. Once Ranger has distributed a Manaphy egg, even starting a new save won't allow you to distribute another one. There are some ways around this, but there's also a way to get the Manaphy egg without having to play 10 hours of Circle Time. Playing the sequel instead. Unlike the original, Pokemon Ranger Shadows of Almia can download special events through Mystery Gift. One of these is a special mission that can distribute a Manaphy egg to the Gen 4 games. The only requirement is to become an official Ranger, which takes a little over an hour of gameplay. With as much dialogue as this game has, it felt like 3 times that. As soon as I was able, I used the DNS exploit to get the event, and I was ready to send my Manaphy egg to Platinum. But for some reason, Platinum wouldn't take the egg. It would register that Shadows of Almia wanted to connect, but when it was time to get the egg, it wouldn't work. After a few tries of troubleshooting, I said screw it and just downloaded the Manaphy directly through Mystery Gift. Normally I would have tried harder to figure this out, but since I had been at this challenge for about 120 hours at this point, I did not mind taking this shortcut. Then there were only 2 Mythicals left to get, and the first one I went for is Darkrai. By using the member card, you can unlock a house at the top of Canalave. Inside is a man who encourages you to take a nap. When you wake up, you'll find yourself on New Moon Island, and if you head into the woods, you'll encounter the pitch black Pokemon Darkrai. After catching it, I awoke back at the cabin, and the sailor told me that the house had been vacant for 50 years. Thankfully, the second Mythical has a much more lighthearted event. After unlocking the National Dex, a new area of the Victory Road opens up. A woman named Marley asks you to help escort her to the end of the cave, and mentions she's looking for a Pokemon to express her gratitude. Route 224 is on the other side, and if you reach the end of the route, you'll find a stone tablet. If you have the Oak's Letter item, Professor Oak will be studying the tablet, and determines that something may happen if someone declares what they're thankful for. Of course, I said I was thankful for my subscribers, but the way I phrased it made it seem like I was a dominatrix. Suddenly, a flower-covered road appeared, which leads to the home of the gratitude Pokemon Shaman. I managed to catch it with just a few Ultra Balls, and I was all done with Legendaries and Mythicals for this challenge. So at this point, I didn't really have that much left to do, but each one of my remaining tasks was extremely time-consuming. To start, I needed to breed a crap ton of Pokemon to either get duplicates or get pre-evolutions that can't be caught anywhere else. I used the Ditto I caught earlier as my designated breeder, so I just swapped out the other parent to get all of my eggs. To make the best use of my time, I bred all of the eggs first and went back to hatch them after I was done. While this whole process is pretty straightforward, it's important to note that certain Pokemon need to hold an item so that their offspring is a baby Pokemon. Some examples are Snorlax needing the full incense for Munchlax, Wobbuffet needing the lax incense for Wynot, and Meryl needing the sea incense for Azurill. Thankfully, there's only a handful of these Pokemon, and I managed to pick up most of the necessary items before this point. With the last egg in hand, it was time to get to hatching. The best way to do this is to lead your party with a Flame Body or Magma Armor Pokemon, fill the rest of your party with eggs, and bike up and down next to the daycare in Solaceon Town. There's one long path that reaches the farthest ends of Route 210 and 209, so as long as you've already beaten the trainers that can see you, you'll be uninterrupted. After hatching all of my eggs, I realized I needed to evolve my Riolu and Tyrogue to breed them because you can't breed baby Pokemon for obvious reasons. In about 40 minutes, I raised Riolu's friendship high enough to evolve it into Lucario, and in just a couple of battles, Tyrogue evolved into Hitmonchan. At this point, I thought I was done, but I realized I forgot to catch one last Pokemon, and unfortunately, it was another daily Pokemon. The Great Marsh is the second most annoying Safari Zone since you can't walk on most of the tiles without sinking into quicksand. Every day, special Pokemon will appear that are called Daily Binocular Pokemon. They're called this because by looking through the binoculars on the top floor of the entrance building, you could potentially see these special Pokemon. Each of the 6 area gets a daily spawn, and at this point, I just needed one of them, Kecleon. Kecleon only appears after obtaining the National Dex, and catching it in the Great Marsh is the only way to get it in Gen 4. Because most of the Pokemon that appear in the binoculars are just normal marsh encounters, I ran around in each area until I found a daily exclusive Pokemon. If none of the 6 were Kecleon, I'd use the midnight trick to skip to the next day and try again. I tried this a few times before calling it a night, but on my very first encounter on the next day, I found Kecleon. I then transferred Trico up from Sapphire and bred 2 more to get the whole line. With those Gen 3 reptiles in the box, I now had every individual Pokemon needed for my Dex, so it was time for the final grind. At this point, I had 362 Pokemon in my Living Dex, which meant I had to get another 131 through evolution. Even by using the most efficient methods, this still took a very long time. When I started the grind, I was at 57 hours and 13 minutes of endgame time. And when I finished, I was at over 88 hours. So it roughly took me 31 hours to evolve all of the Pokemon I needed. So the big question is, where's the best place to grind your Pokemon? The most obvious option is the Elite Four, especially since they're all at a higher level after catching Heatran, meaning they'll give out more EXP. But since you'll probably need 3 to 4 Pokemon to defeat the buffed version of the Elite Four, you'll only be able to have at most 3 Pokemon that need to evolve in your party. And if they evolve while you're in the middle of the Elite Four, you'll have to beat the champion to swap in the next few, which is a huge waste of time. But what if I told you I already know of the best place to grind in the game? On Route 222, you'll find a fisherman trainer named Cole. Cole has 2 Gyarados and a Remoraid, and with the Versus Seeker, you can rematch him as many times as you want. The 2 Gyarados already give a decent amount of experience, but there's a way to take this further. For this grind, I used my Raikou from Soul Silver as my main battler, and filled my team with 5 Pokemon that needed to evolve. As you might expect, I'd give one of my Pokemon the EXP share, which normally gives the Pokemon half the EXP earned from battle. But if the Pokemon holding the EXP share participates in battle, it receives a bigger cut of the EXP than it normally would. And by equipping my Raikou with the Lucky Egg, both Pokemon would gain even more experience. So before KOing Cole's Pokemon, I'd make sure the Pokemon holding the EXP share hit the field first before my Raikou could fry his fish. After several hours, I had evolved every Pokemon from the first generation, and it was time to level up my first Pseudo-Legendary. Pseudo-Legendaries are normal Pokemon whose base stat totals are on par with Legendary Pokemon. There are 5 from the first 4 generations, those being Dragonite, Tyranitar, Salamence, Metagross, and Garchomp. Not only is the average level needed to evolve these into their final forms 51, but they are all part of the slow experience group, meaning they need more EXP per battle to reach the next level. So for these 5, as well as any Pokemon that evolved past level 36, I decided to take them through the Elite Four to level them up. Thankfully the Pseudos weren't too bad since most of them were pretty close to evolving already. The worst was getting Dragonite since the Dragonair I caught was only level 38. It took 2.5 passes through the Elite Four for it to evolve into Dragonite. Larvitar took quite a while since it was only level 20, but since it was traded over from Soul Silver, the bonus experience really helped move things along. Since I had found my rhythm of fighting the Elite Four over and over, I decided to just take care of all the Pseudos before returning to training everything in Dex order. After evolving Garchomp, I also decided to take care of all of the Pokemon that evolved through Evolution Stones. It was at this point that I realized I was still missing several stones needed to finish all of my evolutions. A few of them could be found in Platinum, but I had to trade over a majority of them from Soul Silver. I was sick and tired of trading things between games, but it was a heck of a lot faster than looking for evolution stones in the underground. Over the course of the next 3 days, I slowly but surely evolved all of my Pokemon until August 20th when I had finished evolving them all. The last thing I needed to do was take care of the trade evolutions. I took care of a few of those when trading everything over from Soul Silver, so I only had 11 trade evos left. Everything besides Graveler and Machoke required an item to trigger its evolution, and thankfully I had found just about everything I needed already. The only 3 items I was missing were the Protector for Rhyperior, the Magmarizer for Magmortar, and the Electorizer for Electabuzz. Thankfully, I just grabbed these 3 in a few minutes and was ready to finish the rest of my evolutions. After trading everything back and forth with Soul Silver, I reached 492 Pokemon and had finally completed the National Dex in Pokemon Platinum. I even had the upgraded trainer card to prove it. But just because my National Dex was completed, didn't mean my Living Dex was. I still had 1 Pokemon left. Arceus was distributed through Mystery Gift in the winter of 2009 to tie in with the Arceus in the Jewel of Life movie. While this technically is the only way to get Arceus in Gen 4, there's another way to get your hands on one. Along with the secret key, member card, and Oak's letter, there's another key item obtained through Mystery Gift that unlocks content in Pokemon Platinum, the Azure Flute. If you're a newer Pokemon player, you probably recognize the Azure Flute from Legends Arceus as the upgraded flute that lets you encounter the titular Pokemon at the end of the game. Well, originally, this item was supposed to be used in Diamond, Pearl, and Platinum to do the same thing. But for one reason or another, the Azure Flute was never distributed. But you know that DNS exploit I've used a few times now? Well, on the events server, they have a few unofficial events that you can download, and the Azure Flute is one of them. After picking up the God Whistle from my local grocery store, I ran to Mount Coronet to once again reach the Spear Pillar. By stepping on the platform, the Azure Flute activated and a glowing staircase appeared. This led to the Hall of Origin, and at the end of the hall was Arceus itself. Being the god of the Pokemon world, Arceus is one of the most powerful Pokemon in existence. So I was fully prepared for this fight to take a long time. Oh. Well, with Arceus caught, I not only had every Pokemon from the first 4 generations, but I also completed a Gen 4 Living Dex in Pokemon Platinum. So what now? For those curious, this took me somewhere between 150 and 160 hours of gameplay. While I had 137 hours of footage recorded, I did a majority of the grinding without recording since it was super repetitive and my footage had already taken up almost a terabyte of space. And yes, I did manage to complete the challenge within a month of starting. I definitely cut it close though. So surely after spending a month of my life on this, there would be a pretty decent reward, right? Well, my first instinct was to show my completed dex to Professor Rowan. After all, he is the one who tasked me with completing the dex. Well, when I showed it to him, all he said was that there are many more Pokemon to seek out. Which it's literally not true. I caught them all. Well, that was a bust, but by using the PC system, I could contact Professor Oak and show it to him. He is the inventor of the modern PokeDex, so surely he'll give me a juicy reward. He at least is appreciative and tells me he's impressed that I managed to complete it, but doesn't give me a reward of any kind. But I know someone who will. In a village just south of Lake Valor, you'll find the director of Pokemon Platinum, Takeshi Kawachamaru. If you show him a completed National Dex, he'll give you a diploma in recognition of your accomplishment. And while a digital certificate might not mean much, I didn't do this for a reward. I did this challenge because I love completing video games, I love making videos, and I love Pokemon Platinum. This whole adventure was a labor of love. And the best part is, I'm not done. The biggest completion task might be out of the way, but I still have a long way to go before I fully completed Platinum. It might take a while, but somewhere in the near future, I'll post parts 2 and 3 of this crazy journey. If you made it to the end of the video, thank you so much. I'm always doing time-consuming challenges in Pokemon games, so if that interests you, be sure to subscribe. And if you're looking for live content, I stream most of my challenges live at twitch.tv/nerdyedits. The only reason I didn't stream this challenge was because I'm only able to stream a couple of days a week for about 3 hours. And at that rate, I never would have been able to finish this video. If you'd like to try this challenge out for yourself, I've left a few helpful resources down in the description. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a level 1 Regigigas to shiny hunt, so I'll see you later.